y'all, I'm Abby. Welcome to Abby's Retro Rescue, where I rescue vintage 80s items from estate sales and thrift shops. The Caboodles, I keep buying them and I keep on just putting them in here in my office because they're just beautiful to look at. I also use them around the house to store various things. They're very handy. And, you know, I've had Caboodles since early on. They were invented in '87. Well, sort of. They were made by the Plano Manufacturing Company, Plano Molding, in Plano, Illinois. And they were originally a tackle box company, still are, but they got this great idea to kind of remarket, rebrand, if you will, their tackle boxes into these beautiful colors. So I've been collecting these vintage ones for a while, but I did have one of these. I was an early adopter back in 1987. I had one of the first ones. I'm thinking to myself, mine didn't look like this. Mine was more square. Did I imagine that or was it real? Well, today I can authenticate it was real because I found one. I don't have my original one, but I found one in an estate sale and I was like, oh my gosh, I did not imagine this. They used to be more square. So feast your eyes on this. This is a original on-the-go girl case, the very first one that Caboodles made. So I've been wondering, was I remembering that right? Was mine really more square like a tackle box? This looks exactly like my husband's tackle box except for a different color, the design. And then you see all of these rounded ones. So this obviously came first. This was the very first design, I'm pretty sure. I can't find any information about the timeline, and very few of these actually have dates on them, which is frustrating. But I know I got one of these early on. It does say Plano Molding. It does not have a date. It doesn't have a mirror either, which was like their signature thing. It may have had one that fell off, but it doesn't even look like there's a place, like usually there's an indentation here. So my thought is it might not have even had a mirror. It might have just been a basic tackle box, but in a pretty color and with this logo. So this would have been the original logo. If you look at the old commercials, you see that, but you know, these square ones must be really rare because soon after they started making them like this. Look at this, the very next one. Same color, but the designers have rounded the edges. They've made a fancier little plastic clip here with the ring. Because remember this one? Basic square tackle box. It still has the Plano P logo. Second generation, the rounded one, same logo here. And then look at the handles. Square handle becomes, now we have the rounded handle that we're used to seeing. And I'm pretty sure all the rest of these have the rounded handle. If we look inside and open up the second generation, it does have the mirror. Now this one is slightly bigger, so it has the two-tiered situation. So you can see where the design has improved with this next generation case. And then I could assume that later they were like, hey, we should do lots of other pretty colors. And they started experimenting with these pretty colors. Then we get some two-tone cases like this and a snazzy new logo. And you can kind of see the progression of the designs. But a lot of you guys have asked me, or I've noticed that people are confused about how to tell if one of their cases is an early vintage one or a newer one, because they still make them in all the pretty vintage colors, so it can be confusing. I've gone over this before, but it bears repeating. One of the ways you can tell is just simply these little metal grommets here. The new ones do not have that. They're all plastic. They don't have this ring that's metal. They're just plastic there. And of course, like I said, how to tell the really early ones is the shape. The shape of the case is going to be this more squared off corner, rectangular shape, and also the handle. This is the exact one I had as a kid back in '87. In my brain, it was a lighter pink color. This is more of a lilac purple color. But other than that, this is exactly how I remembered it. And I'm so glad to know that my memory served me correctly, because for years I've been thinking, was I wrong? Like in my mind, I think that it was more squared, and I'm finding these vintage ones and I love them, but these don't look like my case. And then I was just so thrilled to find this. And isn't it in great condition? It was a little bit dirty, as they always are, because these things lasted for years and years. People used them and abused them, tossed them around, and yet still they clean up really nicely. This one cleaned up really beautifully. So I'm so happy to have this in my collection. It's really the one that I have been searching for literally years, because this looks like the one that I had. I do have a pet peeve that I want to point out really quickly. I am an Etsy seller, as you guys know. I do have an Etsy store. It's just called Our 80s Life. And I sell the vintage items that I find. I haven't been able to part with any of my beautiful Caboodles collection yet, mostly because I keep thinking, well, I'll come up with one that's a multiple of the same design and then I'll sell one, right? But so far, all the ones I've found have been just like all different colors, like this beauty, all different colors, all different designs. So I haven't had any duplicates that I wanted to part with. Eventually I will. On Etsy, we're only supposed to be selling things that are truly vintage. That means they're 20 years or older. And I don't want to call out any sellers, but I have noticed a lot of people are posting vintage Caboodles that aren't really vintage. I don't know what your Caboodles switched over to their all plastic construction and stopped using this little metal ring right here, but I know that the ones in the 80s and the 90s look like this. And so really be careful when you're buying them on Etsy or some of the other sellers. If they're calling them vintage, they might not be vintage. They might be a newer one. I can immediately tell by looking. The plastic is usually a little bit shinier. This one is more matte, if that makes sense. Do you see how the handle is shiny? And this one is matte, this part. The newer ones are all super shiny and just newer looking. Notice this first generation has sort of an uneven texture to it. It's not smooth like the newer ones or shiny like the even newer ones. It's just got like this sort of textured finish that's very different from the later models. So just really be aware. I think some of the newer ones do have dates embossed on the bottom. And here's another clue that this is not a vintage Caboodles. It has a website, you guys. There's a telltale sign. This item is not from the 80s. If you can tell from the pictures, look for those, but I don't think people are trying to be shady. I just think that they're finding Caboodles and assuming they're vintage, even though a lot of these were made in the 2000s and they're not vintage, what I would call vintage. Technically on Etsy, it's supposed to be 20 years or older. So I'm not trying to be a tattletale, but it really bugs me when people market their Caboodles as vintage or 80s, and then you look at it and it's like so obviously not vintage. Guys, this is what it should look like. And if you want a really vintage one, this is as vintage as it's gonna get, because this is the original design. I really wish that the Caboodles people would put out like a timeline or spreadsheet or something, but they are just so innovative with their colors, and they came out with so many designs so quickly that they just flooded the market, and unfortunately most of them aren't dated. I do have a few up here, like this guy is dated 1990s, so I know for sure that one. And so I look at the construction of it, it has the same color handle and all of that, so I know these two are probably from around the same era. They also use like these different logos, so you can kind of tell from those, but you gotta do your homework and make sure that you're getting a vintage one. Hey, thanks for watching my video. I hope this little guy unlocked some memories for you as well. And if you did enjoy this video, please give it a like. You might also want to check out my previous Caboodles haul, and I will link it right here.